Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppelliser.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. So, how's everybody doing? Good? Everything is good. It's here. It's like, yep. Weather's nice and hot and steamy in North Florida. So there I've done my weather report with you guys. It was an interesting, you know what? I'll say it again. Sometimes dull is not a bad thing. Dull sometimes and ordinary is not a bad thing. I think it's underrated sometimes. Um, Besides that, it's I was bringing down some big trees. Like I said, I have very, very old trees, and I have an oak that I've gotten guesstimates from different tree people that have come on the property to be either 300 to 500 years old. And most of them have kind of agreed on it, so it's very old. But I had to trim back some of the branches. So I was really careful with that because some of them are telling me, you got to be careful because you will shock the tree and it'll die. And it's like, this thing is huge. You can't, the trunk is, as a matter of fact, some of them have come on here that these are people that, work. There's a lot of live oaks and water oaks and things like that. And they've told me this has got to be one of the biggest live oaks I've seen out here as far as circumference of the trunk. So, yeah, that was my adventure for the week. And it's incredible. They've come a long way with the machinery that they have now to do some of these tree cuttings, especially when they have to go way up there. But anyway, you know what? The branches that were overhanging where I live at, I said, you know what? I'm not going to sit in that part of the house just in case something slips. And so, yeah, but no, it went great. I was real happy with it. And now I've got two huge burn piles on my property that come the fall and winter, I'll be lining them up. By then they will be nice and dry and I'll be good to go with that. So that, and like I said, besides that, oh, everybody's asked me, I'll go to Chicken World because I haven't mentioned Chicken World. I went off and I ran to one of the feed supply places. No, I went to both of them. And like I said, I originally was planning to come back with a couple, and a couple turned into 12 of them. I turned into 12 of them, and like, thank God I had called one day and they said, oh, we're receiving them today. We'll put them out tomorrow. I said, okay. When I go there, the place was mobbed. The part where the chicks were was mobbed. It was like, are they giving them away? What is this? And yeah, there's nothing like seeing what you want. Like this is like the Black Friday of chicks. And anyway, I ended up with 12, but these I know are pullets. I mean, they will become pullets because no more boys. I'm tired of babysitting boys after they get into a fight and mess each other up. So yeah, I've got 12 of them. Let me see if I can take a video or a picture and I'll show it to you guys. So far, they're doing really good. So yeah, let's see. That'll be a lot of eggs. Good. But I don't know about where you're at because over here, eggs are still expensive. I mean, I get a lot of eggs from my existing hens, even though I've been losing them because my hens usually, to be honest with you, I usually lose them from old age. They get sick, I have my hens that have lasted 5, 6, 7 years. I lost an Easter egger that she must have been like 6 or 7 years. In other words, I got my money's worth. I love my girls, but I hadn't replaced them, so all my egg production had gone down. So I'll keep you guys posted on these 12. But it's going to take at least 4 months, depending on the breed, before they'll start laying eggs. So let's see. And then probably by then the egg price will have dropped, but I don't care. I use a lot of eggs for a lot of different things, but yeah, so that's the happenings in the chicken kingdom. So let's get on to the good part. The good part is who is the guest this week at Stories of the Supernatural. And this gentleman is Dr. Dennis Carroll. He is the founder and director of the American Institute for Paranormal Research, or AIPR. He has 40, well, we just discussed before we started to roll. He has 50 years of experience in the field of the paranormal. He has studied, researched, and investigated many aspects pertaining to the paranormal and the supernatural, with many personal paranormal experiences. He is also a researcher and investigator of the occult and the supernatural. Dennis is a well-known authority on folklore, legends, superstitions, cryptozoology, and the occult. He is a supernaturalist, I like that, and paranormal consultant who has advised people throughout the world. Dennis is a published freelance writer slash author who has written several books and is currently at work on a series of adventure novels based on supernatural events. He is an ordained minister and a photographer. He is a well-known UFO and cryptid researcher, as well as being a speaker, and performs lectures and presentations on culture, folklore, myths, and legends. Help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Dennis?
Hello,
How are
it's
you?
good to be here.
Good, 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 good. Let me tell you something. I was impressed when you told me 50 years. I was, God, he's seen it all. He's heard it all. It's like the good, the bad, and the ugly. He's probably run across some version of it.
Absolutely, I've been in this a long time. I hope I don't look that old, but anyway, it's been a long, long haul, definitely. And when I started out so many, many years ago, and I got a story about Miami, a ghost story I'll tell you later on.
Yes, yes. I
Feel
mean, if
like
you
it.
want to go there, go right ahead.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had a friend years ago that lived in Miami, so we'll talk about that. But anyway, when I started out many years ago, when I first had my first experience, I was probably around 13, 14 years old. But
Okay.
I have always been interested in the supernatural aspects. I was a monster kid from way back, and I love the monster movies. Watched
Mm-hmm.
all those. I was big into that. I remember my teachers getting on to me about watching so many monster movies. Doesn't that scare you? I said, no, I love it.
Yeah.
That's
You
my
remember those Hammer
forte.
films with Christopher Lee and his bloodshot eyes?
Oh yeah, I love Hammer, and I like the Universal, the old Universal
Yes.
movies. So
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. But when I had my first experience, and that was, I think, about 14, 15, something like that, it was in a church setting, and I actually had what you would call or term as a demonology type visitation.
Oh, wow.
Demonological visit. Yeah, I actually saw some demons, and they were actually praying for this man.
Oh,
And
they
they
had
told
somebody
me
that
that,
was possessed in
yeah,
there?
he had been possessed, evidently,
Okay.
um, with the demons, and they were praying for him, but they told everybody to bow their heads. I didn't. I kept
Mm-hmm.
watching, because I was interested to see what was going on.
It's like
I never had
I'm
seen
not gonna
anything
miss
like that.
this. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
kids are going to be curious anyway. So
Yeah.
while I was watching, I seen these three spirits. I guess you would call them spiritual entities leave this man one
Oh,
at a
wow.
time, and the only way I can best describe them would be to say they were sort of soccer ball size,
Mm-hmm.
dirty balls of light.
Okay.
That's what it was, a dirty kind of a dark light. I know that sounds weird to say, but it was sort
No.
of a dark light. And years later, I saw different manifestations of these things. So that's just one way they appear sometimes. But this was sort of the raw energy kind of thing about them. And over the years, with many investigations, believe me, I have investigated thousands of places with paranormal, what I call spiritual investigation. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like to call it ghost hunting or ghost busting. I like to call it spiritual research. And I got into that a lot with the demonological side of it to understand what I had seen that day. It lit a fire under me to understand and learn, and it opened the door to me. Once upon a time, like with the monster movies and the horror comics and all that stuff, I knew that wasn't real to a certain extent.
Right.
I always knew that in the back of my mind, but all of a sudden, a door opened and said, "Hey, there is something other than what you can see in this world. There is something else beyond that."
Let me ask you, what
And here's the
denomination was that? That
here's
I'm going to stop you real quick because you said it was Miami. What
the,
church was this at, or do you remember what denomination it was?
well, this was a church. It was a evangelical church in South
Okay.
Carolina where I live. I live in South Carolina.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the foothills of South Carolina, and I've investigated all over the state of South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and into Florida a little bit too. So
Okay. That's
I
so
cover the whole
interesting.
southeast.
Well, the reason why I asked you is I said I know these can't be Catholics because the Catholic, the exorcist, is like they're not going to do it in the church. So basically,
Mhm.
what I guess what I'm saying is that it's most of the time, most civilians, when I say civilians or lay people, never get to see what you saw,
Well,
right?
I've dealt with the Catholic Church over the years, and
Yes.
they're very much like a bureaucracy. You know that. I
Oh,
mean,
yes, of
got
course.
they
Yes.
got to go through the steps and stuff, and that's
Yes.
why a lot of times I tell people, when they come to me with problem. I'm not an exorcist myself. I don't, I have participated in exorcisms
Right.
over the years, but I don't do it myself. I think it's sort of a calling that you got to have.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
But when it comes to the Catholic Church, like I say, they move very, very slowly. And to be
Yes.
honest with you, a lot of people when they need help, they want it right then. Then I can't blame them for that.
Sure.
Want
Yeah.
help immediately, and they
Mm-hmm.
can't wait. So that's why a lot of times I will direct them to these evangelical churches because they're
Yes.
a little more open to this kind of thing.
Exactly. Like, yeah, like they like that. Hey, I don't, I'm next 6 months from now or a year from now, it's like,
Right,
I can't wait that long.
right, exactly. And when somebody needs help,
Yes.
that's what you want to do is you want to help them, and that's been a lot of the focus on what I've done over the years is helping
Okay.
people more than just investigating for the scientific purposes of it or whatever. That's interesting too. But there comes a point where you have more people coming to you say, "I need help. I
Mm-hmm.
need to find the answer to this." That's what
Mm-hmm.
it goes past being a social club and into
Yes.
something where it becomes sort of like a ministry. I am a minister. I am
Mm-hmm.
non-denominational. Okay, I'll put
Sure.
it that way. I'm not that big as religious as I am more or less interested in the kingdom of God itself and not the
Mm-hmm.
religious part of it. But um, the interesting thing about all this that the number one enemy of demons and stuff like that, and we won't get into the theology of it tonight, but the number one focus of them is to destroy. They're very destructive
Yes.
in that
Yes, that
thing.
is.
And
It
so
is.
you have to act quickly with these things. You can't just
Yes.
wait, months, weeks, or whatever. And the
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing, you think about, when you think about exorcisms, you think about, of course, The Exorcist, the movies and all that.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's the scary part of it. As a matter of fact, I talked with William Peter Blatty about that before he died.
Oh,
And he
good.
said,
Okay.
he told me something very interesting about that. He said he was not a believer until he finished that book. And when he did, he was a believer. And I found that very interesting because you can't go into seeing some of this stuff without eventually having to believe what you're seeing does come sort of from with a religious slant to it, or a Christian or whatever. I do a lot of consultations all over the world
Mm-hmm.
with these things, and I've consulted with Hindus, I've consulted with the Muslim people, the Islam, the Islam belief, with people from all different cultures. With this, they still have the same problems
Of
with
course.
demon type entities, whatever name
Mm-hmm.
they want to give them. These
Yeah.
evil spirits are
The
causing people
effects.
a
Yeah.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What they're seeking is corruption of the human soul. That's what they want, in one way or another. And
Absolutely.
that's what they're looking
Absolutely.
for. Whatever you name them. I know Middle Eastern cultures call them jinn. We call them
Mhm.
demons. In
Yeah.
Asia, I know they have different names for them. But the aim, the purpose, is
Oh,
always
yeah.
corruption of the human soul. Besides the destruction part of the life, it's the soul part that they're looking for as far as. And sometimes it goes slow, but I agree with you. Sometimes when people see that Hollywood version, let's say of The Exorcist, like
Mhm.
stuff flying across the room, sometimes it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
exactly like that.
That's exactly why, when I was a kid growing up, like I said, with all this stuff, I knew it wasn't real, but it was very
Mm-hmm.
interesting for me to finally grow
Sure.
up one day and realize, yes, monsters are real. Because
Yes.
I've done a lot of
Yes.
monster hunting my own self over the years. I've done some vampire hunting, werewolf hunting. I've
Mm-hmm.
actually had a lot of vampire cases. These stuff is real, folks. It's not made, but it's not the way Hollywood depicts it a lot. Okay,
No, let
because
me ask you
Hollywood,
something. No, no.
Hollywood's
Well,
all about drama and
it's a
money.
shock value. They got like 90 minutes, depending if it's a movie, to shock you and make you go, oh. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, it's over the top, and a lot of people that's
and,
the way they see. They think
and
that in the real world, that's what it is.
an exorcism is not what you see in the movies. It
No.
takes a team of people. You got to have like a
Yes.
doctor. You got to have a psychologist. You
Yes.
got to have a whole team, and it takes. And listen to this. This is the freaky part. It can take months sometimes
Yes.
to free people
Hmm.
from these things.
Yes.
It takes. You don't just go in for a couple of hours and leave. Most of the time,
No,
that
a
doesn't
lot of
happen.
people think that it's like the movie, like a clap of thunder, they sprinkle the holy water, whatever, the prayer, that's over. And it's like,
Mm,
no. Sometimes even like I said with Catholic, priest exorcism, people are surprised when they see that the exorcist brings this person back several times. And even the case that William Peter Blatty, researched, which was John Doe, which was
mm,
an exorcism that
mm.
supposedly they did in 1949.
Uh,
I think
you know
that
that
kid was
case,
he was
that case
being
began with
exercised for like
a
3 months. Yeah. I'm
the
sorry,
case
what?
began with a Ouija board. With a Ouija board.
Right, yes, exactly.
Uh,
But they had him, I believe the priest that took him to the hospital, it took almost like a couple of months to finish the exorcism uh thing. It wasn't like a one-time deal. So,
And a lot depends on how bad the infestation is, how bad the
mhm.
possession, how deep it goes. Sometimes it can be through. It can be if you catch it at the right moment. It can be
Yes.
very quick exorcism. I mean, it can go very quickly. But if it's been there a while, the longer they put it this way, the longer these spiritual entities are entrenched in you, the stronger they become, the stronger the attachment becomes.
Sure.
And that's what makes it so difficult to free people from these things. And let me tell you something freaky that blow your mind. I have
Yes.
seen evidence that even death sometimes will not free you from possession.
No, they're not. They're not. It's called something
Um,
called nesting or piggyback. They'll piggyback on your soul. And yeah, exactly. A lot of people think, well, if somebody's got an attachment, whether it's an out and out possession or obsession or whatever, like when you die, everybody goes their own way, The person,
mhm.
no, they're nested in you. They're nested. Sometimes they basically hold that soul captive.
And that's why I
Uh,
want a lot of people that's interested in spiritual research and
mm-hmm.
even cryptidology. I've been involved in that for many years as well. Matter of fact, my first full blown case was a werewolf case.
Oh my God.
But
Okay, wait. You know what? I was like, I gotta ask you about this because there's so many questions. Let's go with that one. Let's go with that one. What happened? How did you have that werewolf case? How did that come about?
well, what it was a reported case of a werewolf sighting actually,
Mm,
and
okay.
I think I was like 15 years old when I went to investigate this, and it was like. Maybe 3 or 4 miles from where I lived, actually. And I heard about
Mm-hmm.
this man saying he saw a werewolf that night. And he was out in his backyard, supposedly around some of the garbage cans back there. And so I said, well, I've got to go talk to this guy. This is, a werewolf case. So this is the first time I'd ever actually went. I did some consulting before this, a couple of cases of that, which had to do with witchcraft. But
Okay.
I said, let me go check this out. This is that close. I can walk over there and talk to this guy. And so I did starting out was being my first investigation. I hope I did pretty good with it. But anyway, I investigated and kind of came to the conclusion. I think the werewolf might have been born out of a bottle. I'm not too sure about that. But
You found them at the bottom
anyway,
of the bottle.
I couldn't find any tracks, and that was it. But here's the interesting thing where I live. I live in Anderson, South Carolina, and we do
Okay.
have a werewolf here that has been seen. It's very famous, the werewolf of Anderson. But it was before
Okay.
my time, many years before my time. But this like made national news back
Okay.
in the day, and that's what I kind of hooked it up with in my mind. I knew about this. I said, "Oh, I wonder if it's back." So I got to go check it out and see. But I think it was definitely sort of. I think maybe I'm not going to say a hallucination on that guy's part, but I think it was definitely from another realm that he wasn't interested with. I don't think. But anyway, that was an interesting case, but that kind of was the beginning for me, and that's why I'm kind of the jack of all trades. When I first went into all this stuff, I said I want the whole pie, not just one little piece of it. I
Okay.
want to investigate it all because here's the thing about it. It's all fascinating, like I said, but also I think in some weird way, most all of it is connected.
Yes, I think so
It
too.
is. Yeah.
I think so too. I just think that sometimes people get too focused on one thing and then they miss the other stuff that's going on around it. Do
Hmm.
you think, I'm sure you've heard of people that have said, "Oh, I've sighted what they call now a dog man," which if you look at it, looks like a werewolf.
Hmm.
Do you think that
There's a difference, a big
is
difference
it
between
just are we
talking.
talking the same thing and it's just a different name for the same thing? Because people
Yeah,
didn't know.
I think well sometimes, and I talked about this before. A lot of these so-called dogman sightings may be
Hmm.
misidentification. They may be seeing something like werewolves. And let me say something about the werewolf. The werewolf is absolutely 100% supernatural. Okay,
Yes. Okay.
he is brought about by supernatural dark arts kind of thing. Okay,
Hmm.
and there are different types of werewolves though. I'm not. It's a very interesting subject. Werewolves, just like there are many different types of vampires. The werewolf can be either something that somebody wants to turn into. They can go up the dark witchcraft ladder to obtain this demonic power to turn
Hmm.
into shapeshift into werewolves, or they can
Okay.
shapeshift into vampires. They can shapeshift into cats or whatever the situation that they want to do. This
Right.
is very much like the skinwalkers you hear about.
Yes.
They're
Right.
witches too. These are all witches, okay?
Hmm.
Dark witches, I call them. To differentiate between them and so-called white witches. These are the dark witches. They're out to do evil and get revenge and do bad things to people. That's their hobby, you might say.
Right.
Okay, they're full of darkness and evil, and that's what they do. And the more demonic power they get, the
Yes.
more they're able to shapeshift into these things.
Sure.
But here's the interesting thing about the werewolf: the more times you turn into the werewolf, you
Mm.
it gets harder and harder for you to turn back into the human
Ah,
form. You begin to lose your humanity to a certain
that's
extent.
very
But
interesting.
eventually, one day, you can come back from that. That's just the way.
Right.
That's the price you pay for these things. And
Hmm.
when you lose your humanity, guess what else goes with it? Your soul.
Sure.
That's the way that
Right.
usually goes. Hmm.
So, right, that's the quid pro quo of that salute, like, yeah, I want to become a wolf and I want to do this and I want to do that. And then one day, that's it. Well,
Hmm.
I'm sure you've heard in Louisiana or among the French that they have the loup garou, which is
Oh
like a
yeah,
werewolf kind of version.
the
And it's the
Rougarou,
same thing, that it's almost like a curse kind of thing. Like you turn into werewolf because you're cursed kind of deal.
it has a very distinct spiritual connection to it. Okay, you do evil things or you break some of the precepts of church, like Lent or
Hmm.
whatever the situation is. You can
Right.
be cursed with this, and I think the curse will run like 100 days at a time or something like that.
Right.
That you're brought about, and then here's the weird, freaky part of it: you can get rid of the curse by guess what? Passing it on to somebody else.
Yes, right. It's one
You
of
can
those
do
things
that.
that, yeah, you got to have no mercy on somebody else. Like,
And that's
that's the thing.
exactly why your parents always said don't take things from strangers because
Yes.
spells and incantations and stuff can be passed on very quickly
Sure.
like that. And when you take something, it's yours. You own it,
Yes.
whatever it
Like
may
the only
be.
way you're going to get rid of it or to break
Mhm.
it is pass it on in some cases. There's no such thing as breaking. And I'm sure you've heard in some cases even what they call family curses, where it's the family in and of itself that
Now
kind of,
that's kind of the sad part of the werewolf thing. I call
yeah.
those the wolf. I call them the sort of the wolf man type thing. They're
Hmm.
not 100% werewolves. The werewolf 100% has given itself over to darkness and evil or whatever name you want to give it. It is completely lost into that darkness. It is. Put it this way: Dog Man. If you run into him, he may cut you a break and you may live to tell about it. But if you
Right.
cross paths with a true werewolf, you're not gonna you're not gonna come out of that. Okay,
Right.
he is a psychological apex killer. He will
Hmm.
not stop when he gets your scent. He will find you no matter where in the world you might try to hide. He's gonna come after you. It's
Yes.
almost like a serial killer. He locks in on you.
Yeah. For
And
I've
oh
heard
yeah,
of people having encounters with dogmen who say that somehow or other the the dog
Yeah,
man, and maybe in this case it don't
I'm
follows them or
talking.
finds them where they're at or something like that.
There are, I think, some dogmen that are conjured up. I think they have a darkness
Yes.
connected with them as well, because you're looking at dark witchcraft again. You can either change. Here's the way it goes: you can either shapeshift, or you can call something out of the darkness
Right,
to
like a
do to
conjure.
do
Yeah.
what you want it to do. Yeah, oh yeah. There's a lot of that goes on, and these people who are involved in a lot of these, cults and satanic rituals and
Mm-hmm.
all this, and there are vampire cults, there are satanic cults, there are witchcraft cults.
Yes.
They may go down different avenues, but they all come down the same highway in the end. Okay,
Yes.
that's basically what they're all connected to. They're out to do bad things. But
Yes.
the interesting thing about all this shape shifting and all this stuff, and being the witch to be able to do this, you give up your humanity. But now, if it's a curse and you have no control over that, that's a different story altogether. See,
Yes.
so there's a choice. You either have a choice to embrace this darkness, or if you don't, if you're like bitten or you're cursed by the werewolf, or maybe somebody back down your line made a deal
Mm-hmm.
to do this, or whatever the situation is, and you're not responsible for it. That's a bad situation to be in. Now, let me tell you something about that. They do not usually turn into full blown werewolves. Okay, most of your real werewolves run on all fours. They look like horrible looking monsters, wolves. They can
Yes.
stand up and walk like men when they want to. Okay, they can do that too. But now a wolf man or wolf woman, as the case may be, a wolf person doesn't turn 100% into the wolf. There's a little bit of humanity left in them, more so
Okay.
than the full blown werewolf. That's the big difference between them. That's the curse of the werewolf, and the werewolf itself are two completely different things. But these people, I feel sorry for them because they have no, recourse against this stuff. It's part of their DNA, actually, to changing this. But these curses, like any other curse, any kind of supernatural thing like that, can be broken. But it
Mm-hmm.
takes a very instrumentally ambiguous and very hard effort on your part to break these kind of things.
Yeah.
Okay, it takes a tremendous amount of faith anyway. And I tell people a lot of this, when I counsel them, faith over fear. That's what you got to look at. Okay,
Yes.
and faith cancels out a lot of this stuff if you have true faith. Very
Yes.
much like, I know might be familiar with that vampire movie, about the boy that sees the vampire next door, and his
Yes.
friend, goes after him with the cross, and the vampire laughs at him when he holds
Yes.
the cross up. Says, "You got to have faith to use that."
Exactly. Like it doesn't really matter because this was, that movie that was Fright Night. And
Right now,
I don't know if you remember the original one. They go and the boys they enlist the help of the character he's playing. He's like a make believe vampire killer, but all he does is he has a show. So they go to him thinking he's a real vampire hunter. And like you said, when he goes over there with a cross, the vampire is like, "You must have faith." Like otherwise, it doesn't. It doesn't work because in all these vampire movies, you show the cross to the vampire and that's it. He's toast. But I believe exactly that unless you believe
well, actually,
what you're holding, it's might
that's
as
what's
well.
going on. The vampire's reacting not to the cross itself, but the faith behind that.
Exactly.
That you're
Yes.
putting in it, and it feels that. I have been in situations where I have been attacked by the demons, and I mean physically attacked.
And what happened?
And that was what was the number one weapon I had to use against them was faith over that fear. Fear is a
Mhm.
tool that they use against you. It's a
Yes.
weapon that they can use against you, and you can't feed that beast. You gotta cut that ammunition off.
Yes.
Because when I was in law enforcement, I'm retired out of law enforcement, and we used to have a saying in law enforcement: "It's bad enough for somebody to shoot at you. It's even worse when you gave them the bullets."
Yes.
You
Right.
don't want to give these guys ammunition.
Yes. Yes. But I'm gonna say something, and I don't. Since you've been around like me for a while, you kind of know. I want to say like up to the 1970s, all these monster movies. We'll go with the monster movies. Where you had the evil. The holy object God prevailed. At the end, the good guy with the cross or the holy prevailed. Something happened after the 1970s that all the movies and shows, all of a sudden, it was like evil had the last word, or it wasn't really vanquished, kind of. So I think a lot of people in their mind, they kind of don't realize just how powerful good or God is. Because all these movies, I want to say from the last, what, 40 years, they kind of
Mm-hmm.
portray that evil is so omnipotent that you're lucky, even if you're a good person or faithful, that you might not get away. You might get it. And I think that shifted. There was some shift. And the reason why I reference Hollywood is that I think a lot of belief system nowadays are driven by what people see in movies, in programs like The Exorcist and all these other movies, which is why I think it's scared. I don't know if you remember when The Exorcist came out, that they had people running to churches that had been empty, got full, because everybody was scared about the possession thing. And I think so many people reacted that way because, for lack of a better word, we were innocent. Everybody saw that it was such a realistic movie that it was like, okay, this is not the vampire coming to in the castle. This was like, my God,
I think,
possession, damning your soul. It was like, what? And,
a lot of times Hollywood, I think, is, kind of giving us a propaganda thing, okay?
oh yeah, of
With
course.
everything. It's an indoctrination to a certain extent. I like to go back to folklore. That's what I say.
Yes.
That's my repertoire there. I love folklore. It gives you basic clues to point to the things, the truths that you need to see on some of this stuff. I don't go by Hollywood so much, although Hollywood borrows a lot from folklore. Okay,
Yes.
that's what their researchers do, and they have research. But like we said, they put a spin on it a lot of times, and it's been my experience that most of the time good will triumph over evil. You just
Yes.
got to get there. It's the journey that you got to go on. But um, these a lot of these items that we're talking about, like holy water,
Mm-hmm.
crosses, silver, whatever thing, they've got to be blessed. They're just
Yes.
items unless they're blessed.
Yes. Yes.
And
Salt,
once they are
salt,
blessed or
iron, all these things have to be
sanctified
blessed.
by the
Yeah.
power of God, then they can
Yes.
operate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
People don't realize that the items in and of themselves, salt, iron, silver, all of
Yeah.
these things have to be blessed or cleansed, in other words, besides the blessing, so that they can be used. That's why for lack of a better word,
I
that
have
you
a
had the
saying.
vampire killer's kit. It was
I
nine
have a
times out of
saying that if the demons don't like it, I like it.
so okay,
Absolutely.
here you are. You're growing up. Did you? And like you said, you went on this werewolf case, and you're thinking, oh, okay, this guy, he saw something, and maybe it was a bear, but whatever he was drinking turned it into a
Hmm.
werewolf. What happened? When was the first time that you went on some case that you were like, wow, no, this is for real? What happened?
Well, I think it was one of probably demological cases, one of the very first ones that I went on, where I
Okay,
actually participated in a exorcism. And it
okay.
was very, very freaky thing to see. And here's something you got to understand about an exorcism. Like I said, it takes teamwork, but also you
Mm-hmm.
got to go into it very carefully because it can be very dangerous for people who are even just there. Because these demonic forces uh, can jump from person to person.
Yes, they
But, yeah,
can.
oh yeah,
Yes, they
and I've seen
can.
that happen. As a matter of fact, I was in these circles standing there watching and actually trying to cast the demons out of this young woman,
Mm-hmm.
and the spirit jumped into a guy standing next to me.
Oh boy.
He fell out with it, and I'm going, God, it could have been me. But
Right.
here's the thing about it: if you're there actually praying and your intentions are good, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
think his intentions were he didn't really believe a lot of this stuff.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
and his intention was definitely off center from what it should have been. My
Mm-hmm.
intention was good. I was there. I was praying, doing what I was supposed to, trying to believe with the rest of these people. This guy didn't. And that's why I picked him out. It doesn't
Okay.
do.
Yeah, he was the weak link
Oh
in
yeah,
there.
I've had people ask me over the years. Said, Dr. Carroll, can I be walking down the street and bam, I get possessed? No, it doesn't
No,
happen that
yeah.
way. You got to open doors for this possession, like that boy we talked about with the Ouija board. You got to do certain things that open the doors in your life, whether you misuse drugs or
Sure.
alcohol or pornography or gambling or whatever
Something.
the addiction may be. They can
Yes.
use these doorways to get into your life, get
Yes.
behind this stuff, and really screw you up.
Hmm.
That's what they
Yeah.
work for. That's their goal. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that when what you describe is so accurate, and I think contrary to what people think, it's very insidious. It's very slow. Like you said, once you open that door, once you crack the door open a little bit,
Mm,
then it
absolutely.
progresses little by little by
They're,
little by
they're,
little.
they're opportunists. That's what they are.
Yes.
They're waiting for that opportunity and take advantage of it. And when that happened to that guy standing next to me, I said, it's just like, hey, this is dangerous here. I mean, you're all of a
Yes.
sudden,
Yes.
but that's when I said, no, I got to get control of that. I can't let the
Hmm.
fear get to me. I have to
Yes.
have the faith. The faith is what cancels out fear. Fear is the enemy of faith, but faith is also the enemy of fear. It goes both ways. And I sort of said to myself, I can't fall in for that. And I
Sure.
think that's what safeguarded me in that situation.
And you never
But
know.
during
Maybe
that
something
exercise,
there might have been
during
something
that
else going on in his
exercise,
life you didn't know about that kind of made him also a weak link. You never know. Maybe he had,
and
besides non-belief,
the
you
stuff
know.
that took place during that exorcism is what blew my mind. I mean, this person was crawling around on the floor like a snake, and doing the
Wow.
tongue out like a snake, and coughing up razor blades,
What?
and
Oh.
and while I watched, the facial characteristics began to change on this person, and the
Oh.
eyes went dark. It is a transformation it is scary to look at, to see. And
Did
that's why I
she,
say you've
did
got to
it
get a
work?
hold of your fear and not let them use that fear against you, because a lot of this stuff, you got to understand this when it comes to demons, and most any Catholic priest out there will back me up what I'm about to say. Most of
Mm-hmm.
this stuff is theoretics to scare
Yes.
you and to foster
Yes.
that fear, because that fear is negativity. And that's what these
Yes.
things feed off of. That's
Yeah.
what fuels them, negativity. And the more negative stuff you produce, the more they love it, and the stronger they can become. And you've got to cut that off and not let them do it.
I remember I was reading one time one article and they interviewed this exorcist, but he was out of Italy. He was a Catholic. He was a priest. And they were asking, well, don't you ever get like? And he goes, no. He goes, all that growling or all that weird. He goes, that's window dressing. Exactly what you just said. This is just done to scare you. Like that's like you don't pay attention to that. All right.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
something else that they just want to detour you, but that doesn't mean anything. But let's face it, most people though you do wig out if you see what happened to this young lady that they were exercising. Did it work?
Well,
What
they
happened at
found
the
it
end?
did. The demons did come out of her that night, and she was free that night. She was delivered from that.
Okay.
But it took all night. It was, the exorcism ran on. That was a short one. Took some I've seen.
Okay.
But
Okay.
um, she, I think what helped her a lot, she
Mm-hmm.
came out of the church, I mean, she was used to church and all that stuff. And
Okay.
I think her faith helped deliver her from that. So that's why I think it went so, pretty fast, considering, how long it took. But sometimes when you run into people in these situations, they don't believe. They don't, or the belief
No, they
system
don't.
is not very strong. That
No.
gives the demon more power over them
Yes.
in many
Yep.
ways, and that's
It,
what's so downright dangerous about these things. And and that's
yes.
what I tell people. I caution them. Not it's not to be afraid, not be fearful, but be cautious, be smart. Don't be dumb, be
Yes.
smart, and and don't get into these situations. Don't play around with the Ouija boards and do things like that you don't need to be doing, because you don't know what you're really playing around with. When you contact somebody on the
Mm-hmm.
other side, who do you know who you're really talking to?
Oh no. And it's like, yep. Nope. Nope. That's like
Yeah.
that's a big question mark.
Absolutely.
It's
And that
and
can be
it's
very dangerous,
of course
because
it
once
can.
you open the door, that spiritual doorway, once you open it, you don't know what's coming through it. And you don't have a whole lot of control over it when you do.
And I think people sometimes think that they can't be manipulated or that something evil can't disguise itself as a form of manipulation. It's like, yes, of course they can. They can lie. That's what it's all about. They can lie and disguise themselves. And
Oh,
you
yeah.
hear this a lot of times, like you said, people using the Ouija board that they say at the beginning, they'll communicate with what they think is either a child or somebody that or a spirit that's agreeable, and then as time goes forward, it becomes different. It becomes darker. And it's
Mhm.
like, and I've heard also, and you tell me what you think, Dennis, about people that have gone to either occult ceremonies or even Ouija boards, and they're not participating. They think that because they're standing over there in the corner watching, that nothing can happen to them. And later they
Let me
find
say
out,
this.
yeah, you were
Let me
there in the
say
room,
this.
and that's all it takes.
God can send angels into your life,
Hmm.
and they can be human angels sometimes, and not just celestial angels too. But
Yes,
on the flip side, Satan can send people into your life, okay?
yes.
And they can be either demons or humans, okay? But there are traps that can be set for us, and we have to be very careful about that. But if we safeguard ourselves and keep more positive and the light in us than there is darkness, we've got a bumper there, that will keep this
Sure.
negative stuff back. And that's what we need to concentrate on a lot. But we have to be very careful, and we should not put ourselves into these situations where, even if we're just watching the ritual,
Yeah.
whether it be on the stage with Lady Gaga, or whatever the situation is,
Hmm.
whatever you think, if you're even just watching it, guess what? You're a participant. You are
Yes.
aiding and abetting them
I
and
think a lot of
raising
people
their
miss
kind of
that
power.
point. That
Yeah.
a lot of people miss that point. They think, "Oh, I wasn't doing anything. I was just watching. I was over there watching." And it's like, "No, you are a participant." I'm glad you clarified that. I think a lot of people they don't want to look at it that way, especially when something attaches to them without them realizing that just because they were there, especially if we're talking something
Absolutely.
dark. If we're talking some
You,
type of dark, either whether it's an invocation or a ritual or even just Ouija boards, but some people, it's like, no, I don't want the regular dead person. I want to summon something on the Ouija board that's gonna scare me. And then they get more than what they asked for in some cases.
you know something? The most addictive thing in this universe is not
Hmm.
cocaine, it's not heroin, it's not fentanyl, it's not alcohol. The most addictive thing in this universe is power.
Oh,
The
yeah,
more
boy, that's an
power you
understatement.
get, the more you want. And that's what these things are operating on. They're getting
Hmm.
power in your life. They're taking control over aspects of you. They're taking your. I've often said that being possessed is like somebody else driving your car and you're in the back seat.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
I
You
agree.
don't ever want to get in that position.
And you don't know that when they're taking the keys from you, all of a sudden you find yourself in the back seat. It's like, what? Well, how did I end up here? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
They're going to take you wherever they want to go, not you.
Let me
That's the
ask you,
thing
did
about
you
it.
ever
Power
have?
helping.
Oh, yeah. So everybody thinks it's like all of a sudden, like I said, it's something dramatic, and things can start unraveling little by little. I've heard of people that sometimes the first sign that they have that something attaches, they also having very bad consecutive nightmares. Like stuff like that. It can start as slowly as something like that, and then it just,
Well, they had
you
a
know,
all this is geared for power. It's to raise their
yes.
tone of power. That's what all this. Matter of fact, not long ago, they had a public black mass in Atlanta.
Did you
I don't know if
in
you heard of
Atlanta? In
it. Yeah,
Atlanta? I
I
mean, I've heard of
mean,
one about the stuff in Detroit and Michigan. I didn't know there was in Atlanta.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And
Wow.
they're getting young people to do this. They're getting involved in this stuff. See, and
Let
so
me tell you something. When I look at that, it's like,
you know what? They were advertising. Come, come with us tonight. We're going to open the spiritual doorways. I mean, this is not good stuff. I mean, no
no, it
matter
is
what
not.
way
It
you
is
look
not.
at it, it's
It
not
is
going to
not.
come out good.
I
You
want to
know.
tell, and this is the thing that I tell people. And by the way, I'm saying this people not from a like a religious. I've been a paranormal researcher also for many many years, so I've seen a lot of stuff that is like, okay, let's say you have somebody attends, let's say that mass that they had in Atlanta, which is what 2025, 10 years. Basically, they extended an invitation, and I'm not talking literally the human. I'm talking about whatever was conjured or whatever was given the mass to. You attended, you took up the invitation, or you extended an invitation. I'm sorry. 10 years, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, that invitation will be used and something may come for you. Even if you went to Atlanta back in 2025, maybe in 2050, you were there, and whatever was there will come for you. And you'll think, what? You might not even remember it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And that's one of the problems with people going to play, especially. And I know that there's yeah, how's this? I know that there's people that are go there that are hardcore Satanists or they're into dark, and then there's the curiosity seekers. You know, the ones that just go because oh this is weird, or you're young and whatever, and you just go there more not because you're a Satanist or an occultist, and then you might even forget you went there. It's like, oh, this is nothing. Okay. The repercussions from going to some of these events.
Well, I saw something not long ago, Saturday Night Live, I think 50th anniversary, but Lady Gaga was on there, and they were doing a skit, supposed to be entertainment, a skit where they were like calling up demons, and they were actually using real demonic names. Here,
There
folks.
you go. Oh,
This is not
crap.
entertainment. I don't care what you say. That's
Yes.
not entertainment. That's ritual. Okay.
Now, yeah, exactly. People, how's this? You
But
could
I mean,
say,
I knew the names. I recognized the names immediately. I said, "Oh, that's hardcore stuff. That's not, just joking around, doing stuff." And why do they need to do that? Because they are definitely involved somehow or another in doing these
yes,
things. It's part of their makeup.
yes.
Yeah.
I guess people in general don't understand the power of the spoken word. They
And
don't.
let me tell you
Okay.
this: many years ago, when I was young, I actually attended a black mass. Okay,
Okay.
just to see what was going on. Okay,
Okay.
I always do this stuff from the scholarly point of view. I was never a practitioner of it. And I just wanted to see what happened, and I didn't stay for the whole thing. Okay,
I've been
believe
I've,
me,
I've, I've been to
it
places that
was
late looking back I think what
incredibly
was I
hard.
doing? So go ahead. Go ahead. And we're all there. We all do that at one point or other. Go ahead.
It was incredibly hard to go through what little bit I did. But let me say something about this. Okay, they do horrible things with this stuff. I mean, they're
All right.
drinking blood, they're drinking urine, they're actually eating human flesh. Okay,
Yeah, cannibalism. Some
this
type of
goes on. This
cannibalism.
is
Yeah.
real stuff. It's nothing made
Yes.
up. They're they're not just playing around. A lot of people think, they just playing around. They're entertainers. They don't know what
Mm-mm.
they're doing. They just doing that to make more money. No, no, no. There comes to a certain point where this stuff is deadly, deadly serious stuff for them. Okay,
Yes.
they're signing dark contracts for the power and the money and the glory and all the stuff that they want. They're signing their souls away for this stuff. And 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 here's what you got to do. It's just like being a disciple of Christianity. The more converts you get,
Yeah.
the more people you draw into your circle, the higher your cone of power
Yes.
extends. The more demonic power you are given, the more control you are given, not over just your life, but other people's lives as well.
Yes.
That's what this stuff is all about, control. Like I said at the beginning, that is the most addictive thing in
Yeah.
this universe. Once
Yes.
that power, that dark power gets a hold of you, it wraps chains around your soul and will pull
Hmm.
you so far into that darkness, my friends, you don't come back.
So
You
what
don't want
happened
to.
when you went to the Black Mass? Um, did you how's this? Did you sneak in or did you just or how did you get in there? Or somebody gave
It
you an
wasn't
invite?
easy. Actually, I
Okay.
took someone else's place that was supposed to be there, and he had just been
Okay.
arrested, and he had been arrested, and
Oh,
they didn't.
I love it. I
They
love
didn't.
it.
This other man, he snuck me in.
Okay.
I was wearing a scarlet robe and all this junk, and I had to
Okay.
put it down over my face. And when you are initiated into the Satanic Temple, they
Hmm.
rebaptize you,
Yes.
okay, and they
Hmm.
give you a new name,
Right.
the same that Satan knows you by, supposedly. And
Yes.
that was the one thing said you got when they ask you your name, you got to say this name. I forget. I think it was Melicor or something like that. It was
Okay.
really sounded like a very demonic name. I don't know.
Hmm.
They said you got to answer that. You're going to answer with that. And that was the only thing I did. I answered with that. But
Okay.
I got to the point where they were getting ready to sacrifice something.
Oh,
And what happens when they do this? When they get to a certain point, and there was like a young girl laying on this table here,
right.
and they had candles all around her. And this is nothing fun to talk about. But what happens with these young children? They defile them, they rape them,
Yes. Yes, of
and they
course.
did. They discombobulate them. Shall I
Yes.
say? That's a nice word, I guess. Anyway, they do this as part of the ceremony and offering to Satan.
Yes.
Okay. Once that's done, then supposedly they will sacrifice that person
Yes.
by cutting their throat, drinking their blood, and then
Hmm.
eating their flesh. It is a unholy sacrament.
Hmm.
Basically, that's what it is. It's,
Yes.
the sacrament the Catholic Church does, but it's just in reverse and doing it with
Yes.
real blood and flesh, and not just
Yes. Yes. And
representation of
it's
that.
like a human altar.
Yeah,
But some point they,
absolutely. Well,
but people,
I said, the guy, I told the guy, I'd already said, I'm gonna, get out before they ever started, because when they start doing that, they all disrobe and have sex with each other.
yeah,
It's all
right.
as an orgy. And I'm saying, I'm getting out of here before they do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is,
So he said, he
that's what
told
they,
me when, I'll give you the signal, you get the heck out of Dodge, and which I did. So I didn't get to see the whole thing, but
yeah.
I, pretty well over the years learned what they do.
Yeah,
Bit by
they
bit.
said that it's sex magic, and yeah, it's the orgies, which is defilement,
Mhm.
really, in and of
Mhm.
itself. Besides the drinking of the blood and the, but people don't realize though is
Well,
the real.
different types of magic,
Oh
blood
yeah,
magic, sex magic, earth magic,
yes, yes,
so on and so on, elemental magic. The list goes on of what they utilize. Um, it is a long and drawn out kind of a process, but it's like I say, it involves even ritualistic murder. It
yes.
involves cannibalism. The list
Hmm.
goes on and on. It's just horrible, dark things that they do to acquire the power. Because the more torture, the more pain, the more trauma, the more
There
fear,
you go, right there, right
the
there.
stronger it makes them. Yeah.
People don't realize, they think, oh, the ones that are sacrificed at the human altars. No, they don't want willing victims. They don't want the person that's in. They want the person that's terrorized. This is why you will have
Oh
people,
yeah.
because
Especially
the
young blood. It all comes
oh,
down
of
to the
course,
blood.
of course, of course,
You
whatever
know,
it is, even if they sacrifice an animal,
it's
even
very
that's
much
why they even torture animals and or humans,
it's very much like
because
what the Bible says. The
yeah,
blood is the life. The
yes,
blood is the life. And let me tell you something else. And I think this is spiritual now. Okay, I'm not talking
mm-hmm,
DNA wise and scientific stuff here.
right,
Uh, I'm talking spiritual. I think the soul is in the blood too. I think the soul is part of the blood makeup itself
right,
spiritually. And I think that's what they're tasting to. That's why they like the fear and that
mm-hmm,
adrenaline or whatever, they get started.
right,
They love it because it's sort of like I say, blood on steroids for them.
yeah,
It sort of heightens the sensation. Blood is enough for them, and that's where all this blood sacrifice and all this other stuff comes into play. But when it
mm-hmm,
has infused with fear and young blood
yes,
infused with
yes,
fear, they love that. That's very highly addictive to them. Not
yes,
only, listen to this, not only because it's part of the ceremony, but
mm-hmm,
also supposedly it gives them life and youth as well.
yes, right. Well, you hear now a lot of some of these very wealthy people that take they inject,
Mhm.
blood in their, under their skin, or for facials and a bunch of other stuff. And it's like, oh, you got to be kidding, man. Come on.
Well, they're playing. I call it the God game. They want to
Yeah.
be immortal. They're looking for immortality and all. Like that old country song, "Looking for love in all the wrong places." They're looking for immortality in all the wrong places.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
and that's what they're
Exactly.
playing with. And look, if you
Yes.
got all the money in the world, you got all the fame and the glory and the power, and you got to die and leave it. That's not fun.
Yes. But they don't want
So
to.
they're going to be
And
looking for
sometimes I think
immortality somehow,
of,
and that includes whether or not they may use robotics, they may use cloning, they may use some different
mhm.
things to achieve that immortality. But whatever it takes is what they're going to do.
But and I don't know if you heard, this was a recent
Absolutely.
story that came out, that they were thinking of cloning bodies to use as body parts. So in
Hmm.
other words, like, let's say that they would, like,
Oh yeah.
basically clone the body, not like a section, not like an organ.
Well,
We're
if you
talking
could,
clone here. And then
you could
basically take out the
clone
part of the
yourself.
brain that gives you personality. Just leave the part of the brain that basically your breathing
If you
and the body functions.
cloning's
So in
like
case,
cloning's like having a spare tire. You know,
okay, but you
you
know
wear
what?
out one part, you got another part to replace it with. So if you got your own clones, you can live forever that way.
Well, you know what? From what I hear, even cloning of animals has not gone good. Like, nothing is as good as the original. Clones, they don't live as long. they're just not the original things. And I know that the idea
Let
behind
me
it
say
is,
this about that, okay? And you hit on a good point there. I have seen the demonic try to recreate things, and they can't. Only the
no,
creator can create, okay?
yes,
They can just
yes,
manipulate what's already there. And I have seen them actually try to look like children. Let me tell you a quick story. I had
yes.
a case one day where there was an apartment complex not far from where I live. They started reporting to me that they were having all kinds of weird stuff going on out there. Okay.
Okay.
And they said we've got shadow people, we've got, all kinds of demonic activity going on. And I thought, well, what the heck? Everybody in this apartment, complex, not just
Okay.
one apartment. I said, something's going on with this. So I
Yeah.
got to looking around, and back behind these apartments was an old cemetery.
Ah, oh boy.
And I went out in the cemetery. I got a bad feeling about that. And I went out in
Mm-hmm.
the cemetery, and sure enough, I found black candles out there. Somebody
Bingo.
had opened the doorway in that cemetery and didn't close it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what was going on in that apartment complex. And when I went out there and closed that store spiritually, and then
Mm-hmm.
went back and did a cleansing on that whole apartment, and that ended the whole problem up there. But that's what was going on. So you got to always look at these things as maybe having a key, or maybe more than one key. Sometimes these cases
Mm-hmm.
will have more than one key. But that's where you being as a detective light comes in. At you got to solve that mystery to
Yeah.
understand what's really going on there. And a lot of times people, I had a woman call me one day, and she said, "I bought a house the other day." And so I bought a house, and I went up, and upstairs there's one room painted completely black.
Oh.
I said, "Whoa, that don't sound good. That
Oh.
doesn't sound good." And she said, "Even the windows are painted black, the ceilings
Oh.
black, every bit of it." I said, "Well, I don't know why I know this, but pull the carpet up in this room and tell me what you find." When she called me back, how did you know there was something? I said, I didn't, but I was just guessing. What is it? She said, there was a big red pentagram
There you go.
under this
Of course.
carpet. So
Mm-hmm.
there were weird stuff going on in that house, and that was the reason why. Somebody had opened the door. And wherever you open these doorways, if you don't close them, and that's
Yeah. Of
people do this
course.
with Ouija boards, they do it with Ovilus. The
Yeah.
Ovilus is nothing but an electronic Ouija board, okay?
Yeah. It is.
That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And when you open these doorways and you don't close them back, you asking for
Yes.
trouble. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
So you know what? There was one time you know that there's people in real estate that is exactly what they do. They work very selectively with what they call stigmatized properties, like what you just described.
Hmm.
Maybe this property's been a rental. The owner doesn't realize that maybe one of their last or whatever people that were living there were practicing. So all of a sudden they go and they find a bedroom, or a room up that you could tell black. They even sometimes find other stuff that's been left behind. And in some states, people sellers have to disclose certain things about a property. And there's these real estate agents that's what they do is they go in there and basically kind of fix on a spiritual level when
Well, if you were
properties
going to
have
buy
been
a house,
stigmatized this way.
if
Oh no, let me
you're
tell you
going to
something. I'd be like, I don't care what house it is, what the price is. I walk in there and I see something like that, or if the real estate agent says, "Look, we're reducing the price, but this," and be like, "Don't. Let's just stop right here." End of conversation. Even if you gave it to me, I don't want it. Thanks. Bye. I'm out of here. Yeah.
It's like maybe, 6 or 7 people have been killed in the basement. I don't think I want to live
Yes.
there.
Yeah. Well, that's there are laws like if murders or crimes are committed on certain properties on real estate, they're forced by different state laws to disclose it. But like you just pointed out, sometimes things happen that law enforcement is never aware of. People are done away with, like you said, in the basement, and nobody's there.
Mhm.
It doesn't. No, in other words, somebody
I
gets
have
killed for whatever reason, whether it's having to do with a ritual or not. Just bad things were happening there.
oh yeah,
They
it,
they
it leaves a spiritual stain
Oh
there.
yeah,
That's
for
what it does.
sure.
Yeah. I've actually been called in to cleanse certain murder scenes where murders
Oh,
have
let's
taken
hear
place.
that. Let's hear that. What happened?
Yeah. Well, Sometimes, it goes pretty well. I've actually had, using blessed salt and stuff like that. I had the salt
Uh-huh.
knocked out of my hand one time across the room. They don't want you
Okay.
to do some things. Don't want you to do that.
I bet
But
not.
um, no matter what you do, and no matter what the cleansing, most of the time that stain remains. Although it may not, you know, hurt or bother anybody, and a lot of people may not even sense that. It's still there to a certain extent. It's like a
Oh,
memory. It's like the earth itself retains a memory of what has happened.
yes.
Although the memory fades in time, I have seen places that were so haunted or so demonically infested that they would be struck by lightning and burnt down. It's
Yeah.
almost as if God couldn't let them exist there anymore.
Yeah, like
They were
something
that
is.
bad.
Y-
Yeah.
You know what? I think also it also has to do with, let's say, let's say you get a house like that, something dark or murders or whatever, and it's cleansed. I think a lot has to depend on who moves in there. If you've got like a good family that, like you said, but if you get anybody that moves in there who's spiritually has problems or maybe a dark personality, I think that kind of revives it and
Mhm.
then it comes back, you know, like it doesn't fade away and it's like, oh, hey, this is one of my kind, you
Unless
know.
you do something, you can do something sometimes to reactivate something like that if
Sure.
you're not
Yeah.
careful. It may be lying dormant if it's not completely eradicated.
Mm-hmm.
It lies dormant. A lot of paranormal activity does that. It can lie dormant for a long time until
Yeah.
something stirs it up or something occurs that makes it come back. I'll tell you a quick story about the
Yes.
Miami story I was going to tell you about since we're talking about this.
Yes.
Uh, this was many, many years ago. Like I said, I was a kid and I was about 15, 16 years old. I was beginning to learn how to interview people,
Mm-hmm.
and to get information out of it. And there was this lady that my grandmother knew that came from Miami, and
Okay.
her name was Edith Young, and we
Mm-hmm.
called her Granny Young. She was my grandmother's friend, pen pal
Mm-hmm.
like, and she came from Miami to visit my grandmother up here where I live, and that's how I knew her. And she was a real sweet lady. She lived in Miami most of her life, and I think eventually her son, who was a very well-known ethologist, one of the world's expert on bugs, by the way. His name was
Okay.
Bud Young. He finally got her out and took her to Indiana where he lived and all that because she kept getting her house kept getting broken into and all that.
Okay.
But anyway, when she was a young girl, she told me this story, and I interviewed her about it. When she was a young girl, her and her mother and her little brother lived. I don't know whether the father might have been working somewhere else or something. I don't know what the situation was, but they lived in a big old rambling house in Miami. And
Okay.
this house had a I think it was a 2-story house. And she said that it was haunted. I mean, you didn't live long in this house without realizing it was haunted to high
Okay.
heavens, kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
said that they'd had all kinds. She told me, I could write a book about all the things that happened in that house. But she said that there was a basement, and this house had once upon a time, back in Prohibition days, been a speakeasy.
Oh, there we
Okay,
go.
and
Yes.
or nightclubs as they call them now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very much like that. It was a big hangout. But now, when
Mm-hmm.
they lived in it, it was just being rented out. Okay, but
Mm-hmm.
she said that they had a basement and they were not allowed to go in the basement. Matter of fact, the basement was kept locked. And
Mm-hmm.
she said that when it rained on rainy days, humid days, there was a terrible smell came out of that basement.
Ooh.
And she asked her mother about it one day, and she said, "Oh, that's just that old whale that's down there. There's something in the whale. Some did it."
Mm-hmm.
And she said that's probably where a lot of murder victims were disposed
Yes.
of in the whale, probably. But anyway, so this house was very badly haunted. And here's the story she told me. She said one day she was helping her mother hang out clothes. They had a big clothesline outside this
Mm-hmm.
house. And this house had a lot of windows in it. And kind of like sort of a quasi southern mansion looking kind of a house. Okay.
Uh-huh.
If you get that in mind. Anyway, they were hanging clothes out on this day, and her little brother was there. And they were the only ones in that house. Okay. They were outside, and said she was helping her mother hanging clothes up. And all of a sudden, and it was a summer day, you know how hot it gets in Miami. So a hot summer day, said all of a sudden every window in that house closed by itself.
Oh boy.
Bam, 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 all the way.
Oh boy. Okay.
And the storm shutters also closed. Bam, 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 bam.
Oh.
All the way around that house. And so her mother just looked at her like that, and she was just looking at her mother and said, that happened. That happened just then. And said it wasn't much longer after that that her mother moved from that house.
I bet I'd be like, mm-mm.
Yeah.
You know what people don't realize is during Prohibition, what they would do is, in Bimini and the Bahamas, there was no Prohibition. So what they would do is these ships would just go over there, load up with all the booze, and they would come in off the coast. This is, of course, is against the law. That's why they call them the rum runners. Because, they're the bootleggers, the ones that had the stills. But they were over here off the coast of Florida. Bimini's right there. Bimini is like off the coast of Florida. They would go out there, load up. Yeah, and Havana and Bimini. But Bimini's closer. And they would just come in there with a rum. And they would just drop him off or load him onto bigger ships. But there was a lot of dark criminal stuff going on because of that. Because they were bringing in the rum in from like the Bahamas and all the islands, and it was just easier. And yeah, there was a lot of dark stuff going on with that Prohibition. And the thing is,
if you didn't cooperate with certain businessmen, you would definitely be disappeared very quickly.
This is the thing. Miami-Dade County, every county, when they did the Volstead Act, it was a federal law, so it was all the United States. But Miami-Dade, back then it was just Dade County, they went dry 6 years before the Volstead Act. So it was illegal for drinking in Miami 6 years before Prohibition was the law of the land.
Yeah.
So there was a big, what's my point?
That's amazing.
There was already a big criminal organization going on by the time that Prohibition really hit. There was a lot of people getting...
Of course, they were running a lot of guns, too. Guns were prohibited, too, so they were bringing a lot of those as well.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, but there was a lot of... And you know what's really funny? That a lot of the so-called upstanding citizens... They were the ones that sometimes would use their big yachts.
I would love to know the history of that house, definitely.
Yeah, God, I mean, I'm very.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in Miami, so I understand Miami exactly. And that's the thing. A lot of these older homes, which were probably on East Miami, a lot of them, unfortunately, were torn down as time went by, and. But yeah, there's a whole history of what they call those speakeasies, or like you said, or like not only was it the drinking, it was the gambling stuff. And yeah, they did away with people, and that never made the papers. And it was like, so and so, yeah, don't ask about him. Just don't worry about it. He's gone. Or what they used to call them blind tigers, or blind tigers or blind pigs. But yeah, there was a lot of that going around in Miami-Dade in the 1920s. So. I'm not surprised when you're telling me that story. It's like, yep, that happened. So and out in the Everglades, they had a lot of moonshine stills going out there in the hammocks. A lot of them.
Oh yeah.
They'd be producing moonshine out there. So we either got it coming in from the Everglades or it came in out of the islands. One of the two. Let me ask you have you ever had anything follow you home, Dennis?
Well, a lot of mob activity that went along with that. I know Al Capone had a lot to do with a lot of that stuff as well. A lot of the mafia mob stuff was involved deep in that stuff, bootlegging especially, guns and all that as well. Yeah.
Well, Al Capone, he died and he had a mansion out here in Miami. And even after they released him from prison, he had really bad symptoms of syphilis. Like, I mean, it had already attacked his brain. So I think his last 6 years of his life, his wife was like taking care of him. And basically, from what I understand, he just had this big guy that was kind of protected him in jail because, in other words, the tough guy was not there anymore. They would have killed him if he wasn't protected by one guy that took pity on him, a fellow prisoner. And then when he got out, like his wife, said, please let me bring him home. The syphilis had really done a number on him, as far as. But yeah, he has a mansion here.
towards the end of his life, he was seeing a lot of his former victims, the ghosts of them,
Yes. Yep.
supposedly. And whether
Yep.
that
Yep.
was
Yep.
the syphilis or what, you have to wonder.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, they demolished the mansion that he had. Like I want to say, 2023 or 2021, they demolished it, and it's on an island. Like if you go through the causeway, it's an island that you have to go, for obvious reasons. It's really funny because there was a bunch of mansions on there, and they found later on that they had tunnels running from mansions to mansions, underneath. Nobody ever
Oh,
knew, that they,
mm.
which is how they, a lot of times they bring in whatever it was, whether it was girls or, booze or guns or whatever.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was, after a while they were getting
Yeah.
watched all the time by the
A
FBI. They were being under surveillance. So this is how
lot
they
of
got
houses
around it.
in California are that way too. They have a lot of those rum tunnels, they call them,
Yes.
uh, under their houses as well. So, yeah, wherever you were close on the coast and all that, that was a
Yes.
big hub for that, kind of bootlegging and gun running
Yes.
stuff that went on. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like
Mark,
forensics
you,
now. People disappeared and it was like, there was nothing like nowadays that you got forensics and DNA and they'll come. It's like, nah, people disappeared. And I tell everybody it's because I do look at true crime. That's why back then sometimes I would find bodies and the hands were missing and the heads were missing so that they couldn't be ID'd. That's if you found anything, which by the way is also a source of a lot of very bad hauntings, especially if people were basically done away with and just thrown away.
yeah, I heard stories about the St. Valentine's Day massacre in
Hmm.
Chicago. They still say that on the anniversary of that killing, that you can still hear gunshots, like they're far off in the distance, like they're fading away, but they say that you can still hear those gunshots from that. And like I said earlier, any of these places that have that kind of dark history, it's going to definitely have a stain to it. And
Hmm.
I have some friends in Florida that actually I think live in a house. They told me that had once been the home of a serial killer. I would not feel good, about living in a
No,
place like that, definitely, because it's not. They may be dead and gone, okay, but the influence, the demonic influence,
that's yeah.
still exists in areas like that. You have to be very, very cautious with. I would do a lot of cleansing. As a matter of fact, that's the price you pay when you deal with demonology and all that stuff. That is a definite price you pay. I have to, cleanse my house at least once a month or so,
That's
because
what I was gonna ask you. What
oh
happens?
yeah,
Like, what is
and
there like a?
and many many times I have had a lot of people that do investigations come and say, "Well, I brought something home with me," something
Uh-huh.
followed me back home, and this happens a lot. And that's why I don't even like to see little children go on these investigations because they're much
That's
more
stupid.
susceptible to these things. But
That's
you got
stupid.
to understand when you go in to this situation, you need to protect yourself spiritually,
Yes.
going in and coming out. Or if you don't watch out, you will get an attachment of some sort. It
Yes. Yep.
happens a lot of times. So yeah.
Yes. 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 Have you ever had anybody send something your way intentionally? How's that?
Oh, I've had death curses put on me
Oh, really?
occasionally.
What happened? What happened?
Well, I had a dark warlock one time. They like to tell you that they put a death curse on you because it starts working psychologically on you.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
he blew boofer. I don't even know what bluefer dust is,
Mm-hmm.
but it's graveyard dust that they use. And he blew it in my face, and I curse you to death.
Okay.
From this time on, you're gonna die. And I laughed at him. I said, "Well, I don't, I'm not gonna help you and participate by believing in that. I'm still
I
here, okay? But I've had several death curses put on me like that, and like I say, it's a psychological thing. They always let you know when they're doing it.
yeah, because if you
Because
don't know, it's like
yeah.
exactly. It's one of these
Hell,
things.
one time I had a friend that she had a dead chicken sent to her.
Oh, that's wow. That's
And that's voodoo, definitely.
oh yeah.
And then I had matter of fact, I think I got it right here. I had a this knife that I found sticking up in my front yard
There you go. Holy
with a
crap.
death curse on it, and of course I cleansed it. That's why I kept the knife to show people. But I've had several of them. I even had a pentagram once marked on my front door.
Uh-huh.
I have some enemies, I'm sure, definitely, and a lot of these things they don't. They definitely form weapons against you, but as the Bible says, no weapon formed against you shall prosper.
Yes, of
Faith is
course.
what cancels this stuff out every time, and that's what
They
will secure you. That's what will secure you in the long run. And that's why, I would say to everybody listening tonight, that's the number one thing you got to remember. Get a hold of your fear. Don't let fear counsel you out.
No, of
Fear
course
is
not.
what is your enemy and all this stuff. And you can't give in to the fear. That's what these dark forces want. They use that fear as a weapon.
Have
Don't
you
let them do that. You don't.
have you
We have authority. We have been given authority over these things.
Yes,
When we
yes, and a
need
lot of
it,
people don't believe that though. Unfortunately, they don't believe it. They kind of like let go of their control of their power. In other words, they give it away. They don't believe what you just said. So, let me ask you, Dennis, have you ever had cases involving an elemental spirit?
oh yeah, I've run into elements. They are very difficult to deal with sometimes,
Hmm.
because they have very strong attachment to the land
Hmm.
itself, and
Yes.
so a lot of times I've had to running into these situations. You may not can eradicate them completely, but you
Hmm.
can box them in. In other words, you can put them in a place where they can stay, and you can avoid that area. That has to happen sometimes, not every
Yes.
time. You have to go case by case, but I've had that happen. Where I think there was one incident with this lady on the farm, and we were never able to actually get rid of this elemental spirit, but we cordoned it off into a field there,
Okay.
and she would avoid that field from then on, and
Hmm.
that was one way we had to deal with it. They can be incredibly hard to get rid of
Yeah.
because they feed off of the power of the earth itself, and
Hmm.
the earth is incredibly energized.
Yes.
The earth that we live on is a living thing. That's where
Yes.
your lightning comes from. Lightning doesn't come from the sky; it comes from the earth. That's where it originates. There's a lot of power in this earth, and a lot of things on this planet know how to utilize that
Yes.
power.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yes, and that's why I asked you that thing specifically about the elemental because that's in and of itself is totally separate because that's I don't want to say it's part of nature but separate and it's ancient. I want to say most of these
It's
elementals,
connected. It's connected to nature. It uses nature, but it's
yes.
not really part of nature,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in that respect. But it connects to it. It uses it, utilizes it. I just say like plugging your toaster into the wall. You plug it into the power outlet, and that's what these things are doing. They're plugging into the power, I think, of the earth itself. That's where you
Sure.
get the term
Let me ask you
elemental.
something. What had she done something or was it just accidental? What happened with that lady that she ran into that problem with the elemental? Do you remember what she, because I know
Mhm.
sometimes people
Yeah,
build
uh,
or make a
she,
well or do something and then it's downhill from there.
well, she, like I said, avoided the pasture. She said, "Well, she had a lot of land, so
Okay,
didn't
okay,
bother." And so she said, "Well, I'll just avoid that." And she had horses. The horses didn't
okay.
even want to go out there. Okay, the horses would
Yeah,
kind of
that's a good
avoid
that's
it.
a good sign right
And I
there.
said,
Yeah.
well, just give them that part. If you want to stay here, and you want to deal
Mm-hmm.
with this, just kind of give them that part and leave them alone over there. Let them do their thing or whatever it is on that situation. You
Right.
stay on your side. So she had a whole lot of land, so it didn't bother in that respect. And the
Right.
last time I talked with her, which has been, let's say, been several months back, she, said everything was going fine and they were not coming in the house and bothering her. So that was their main
Okay.
concern. They
Sure.
were getting in her house. She had a lot of shadow figures and all kinds of stuff going on in her house.
Ah, okay.
So we
Okay.
sort of cordoned it off away from the house, definitely. So she was happy with that.
Okay. Because sometimes I know that sometimes people will do things accidentally. Like I said, they'll make a well or they'll knock over like a big tree, like uproot it. Like sometimes that'll stir up elemental spirits, which before nothing was happening, like everything was copacetic. They're over there and you're over here, and we'll ignore each other. But then people do things accidentally,
But here's
and then
another thing. Here's another thing you got to look at. and I've run into this in a lot of cases before. A lot of the Native Americans cursed a lot of this land.
Okay, yes,
They
I've
put a
heard of that.
curse on this land for two reasons mainly. Of course, it was kind of like revenge on their part, but
Mm-hmm.
also it was to secure that land with like a guardian, you know,
Yes.
over the sacredness of the land itself. So they
Mm-hmm.
placed these, we call them curses. They were sort of like, you know, something that they set there. I call it sort of a matrix that they put over these things.
Right.
And you run into that sometimes.
Sure.
That cursed part of the land itself. It was put there by Native Americans for a purpose. Usually, when you run into that, you're either close to their burial grounds or their
Mm-hmm.
sacred lands that you run into that. And here's another thing you got to look at. And I also, you know, being involved in cryptidology stuff, I go in the woods a lot. You may run into some parts in the woods where a lot of these rituals take place that they do. And when
Yes.
they have certain places that they have like that, they place demonic guardians over these places.
Yes, they
You can
do.
run into that as well. So
Yes,
you have
they
to be
do.
very careful. One of the worst incidences I ever had was a haunted brewery, by the way. Yeah, the
Oh,
only
that's pretty
spirits there,
good.
they weren't only just in the bottles, okay? But
Uh-huh.
anyway, it was very interesting. This thing, there was a spirit there, a dark spirit that had been put there by a dark warlock, and it
Wow.
was a guardian or demon type thing, okay?
Okay.
That thing attacked me on the stairs that night up there, and it tried to kill
Whoa.
me by pushing me down the stairs. I mean, it's a very long stairwell. And there was a landing. It was two stairs, like, and there was a landing in the middle of them, and then
Uh-huh.
and I was luckily on that landing.
Okay.
This thing jumped me. It jumped me on my back. I mean, I could feel this thing on my back. I could
Okay.
feel its claws in my back, and I physically grabbed this thing. I could feel it with my hands,
Wow.
and tried to pull it off and over me. And I think I finally got it off on me that way. But it was attacking me physically. And I said, "Oh, there's something different. This is just not your run of the mill paranormal stuff going on here, you know."
Yes.
So I
Yes.
investigated and found out that this dark warlock had a store in one of these buildings,
Mm-hmm.
and I had somebody with me on that team, and I said, "Go check this store out. You know, go walk around there and check and see." And he come back and he said, "It's empty, but there is a pentagram drawn on the side of the building."
Whoa. Yeah, there you go.
And when I heard that, I knew exactly what was going on. I said, "Ah, you know, 2 + 2 = 4, definitely. I know what's
Mm-hmm.
going on here. We have encountered a guardian demon."
Yes.
And we finally got rid of that thing. And several people saw it that night as a
Wow.
shadow with eyes, like that was
Mm-hmm.
that jumped on several people that were there and attacked them. And I've had demonic attacks, and usually they attack me usually physically, although they can
Right.
attack you spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. Matter of
Yeah.
fact, I was on television with the Ghost Asylum gang. Those are the guys who used to have a TV show,
Yes. Yes, I
and
know.
they
Yeah.
had gone and encountered some of these spirits in an old asylum. And of course, that's a number one place for demons. Any kind of traumatic place like that, they
Oh,
love
for
places like
sure.
that. Places of the dead, places of trauma and death. Anyway, that one guy was investigating that night. He finally said in the middle of the investigation, "I got to get out of here. So I can't even think straight anymore." I said, "Well, what it's doing is attacking you mentally." I have been attacked all 4 different ways, and I know what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not a good feeling. And I had one guy get attacked emotionally one night with me while I was there. It took him months to get over it.
Yes. People don't realize that. It's almost like where's the chink in your armor where I can get to you? What, like you said, whether it's a mentally,
Oh yeah.
emotionally, spiritually, whatever, sometimes physically, people get ill. I've heard of sometimes people feeling really sick after an investigation, and it
Oh
takes
yeah.
them about a month to get over it. Like it's like not anybody can get sick. It doesn't have to be, but that there's something that they come to realize that it was some type of attack.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. That's why you know what, Dennis, sometimes you see all these people that go legend tripping, especially to cemeteries, and I think that it's like, you might get more than just the spirit of somebody that died there. There's a lot of stuff that people leave behind in cemeteries or spell work that they do there that They leave stuff behind there on purpose or by accident. And I said sometimes even the, you know how they say the beginner, sometimes beginner's luck. Some of them go out there and try to invoke something, not really knowing what they're doing. They just pick up a book and they actually get to invoke something and they leave it there. Like you said, they open the doorway. They don't know how to close it. And then you see the
That's
other
if
ones.
you read
Oh,
it out loud. That brings it to life more.
yes,
When you
yes. And
read
then people
something
go
out
in there and they're like, and it's like, I was just walking out there just to get scared a little bit, not realizing, yeah, there's more out there
loud.
than,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
that's the one thing that's haunted me from the beginning. When I first had my very first experience when I was that young, and it still haunts me to this day. If when I saw what I saw, and I had to ask myself this question: if this is real, if this
hmm
does exist, then what else is out there?
of course. Of course. Doesn't that
Mm,
they can wake people out really a lot because that opens the doorway to the possibility of what else out there is out there that, you
mhm.
think, okay, it's all horror movie or fantasy or made up or stuff like that. And it's like, well, how much of it is really made up and how much is there a possibility? Because sometimes it's just the possibility of it being real.
Oh
And
yeah.
I don't know if you've run across it. I've gone where people have been brand new ghost hunters and they're all excited because they want to have that experience. And sometimes, like I said, beginner's luck or not luck, they really have a full-blown experience very soon out of the gate and they stop. All of a sudden they don't come back because it's not what they imagined it. It wigs them out so much that
Yeah.
they just get out of it. They're like,
I've
and
had
I,
people ask me that over the years, say, "Well, I never had anything like that happen to me. How come so much has happened to you? You've seen so many different things." And all. I said, "Well, probably because I was looking for it. Yeah, when you look into something, most of the time it will look back at you, no matter what it may be.
right, exactly,
And
exactly.
a lot of people they say, "Well, God, I wish I could have some experiences like that." Maybe you don't. Maybe you
Yeah,
don't
that's
live
like
in
what's that saying about be careful what you wish for? Because some people, when they get it, they're like, huh? Like, I want to go back to before I witnessed this. I want to go back to when I still thought this stuff was make believe. Because it kind of shifts the way you look at things, the
Mhm.
possibilities of things.
You can't unsee some things
Oh,
sometimes.
there you go.
That's
That's it.
what it
That's exactly what it is. You can't unsee it, no matter what. Yeah, yeah. Especially if it's something that's very difficult to explain it, like through rational things, like,
Well,
and you realize,
that's for years I've talked to people about this, done a lot of lectures and stuff like this, and I tell them, for many years I was banging my head against the wall since I need to prove this to you. I need to show you this. I need to get you to believe this. When
hmm
really, that was really a stupid thing to do on my part because
yeah,
people are going to believe what they're going to believe,
of
okay? And
course,
it's not our job to make you believe anything. It's our job to present you with what evidence we may have, and you draw your own conclusions on that.
exactly.
If you
And
want to
that's really
ask
when
my
people
opinion,
believe.
that's fine. I'll give you my opinion, but you know, you can't just keep banging your head. It's gonna prove.
No,
They go out and try to prove this, this. Look at this. Look at this. You're wasting time. You will know. That's the main thing. You know.
at some point, people sometimes,
That's
like you
what
said, you
counts.
leave
Yeah.
them to their own devices, and they will either something will happen to them or they witness something and they get to it more sometimes, even if you try to explain it a
Like
million
right
ways.
now tonight, you and I could have our picture taken with the ghost of Elvis Presley. Nobody'd ever believe it.
Yeah, I bet.
That's just
I'm
the way it
sure it'd
is.
be like, oh, that's Photoshop. That's okay. They photoshopped Elvis into that picture.
AI, this AI stuff. AI is making a whole lot incredibly harder on researchers now because
Oh,
you really don't know what's real and what's not real
of
anymore.
course not. Of
And
course not. I
but
look at some of these things and it's like,
there are certain elements of evil that like that
oh yeah, of course,
because the
disguises.
power of the devil, my friend, is that nobody believes in him.
Yes, of course. And everybody thinks,
That's
oh,
the
it's a
problem.
goof. It's not real. It's like, oh, it's make believe. And it's like, you know what? It's sometimes it can creep in there. There's a darkness that creeps in with paranormal research that if you don't know what you're doing, all of a sudden you go fishing and instead of a sardine, you get a great white. That's what happens. They end up with something beyond what they thought when they go legend tripping or they go coast hunting or they do some stuff like that. It's like And then they're the ones that maybe give you a call later on saying, "Help, help! I this is
Well, that
happening,"
did happen a
and
lot. Yes, that's an occupational hazard,
yeah,
definitely,
yeah, of
absolutely.
course,
Well, I'm
of
writing
course.
a book right now. The latest book I'm trying to get done here. It's
Yes.
called Paracryptidology.
Okay.
Once upon a time, the paranormal and cryptology was two different fields, but now they've gone together. They've kind
Yes.
of meshed together, and
Hmm.
they're no longer two separate communities. So that's
Yes.
why I named it Paracryptidology, hunting monsters and things of nightmare.
Yes.
And that is a fascinating part of all this, that monsters are real and they do exist. But here's the interesting thing of all: the monsters are real, but most of the time they are us.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's startling to think, and sometimes they're very handsome or very beautiful looking, by the way, to go with it. Let
Oh,
me ask
well, thank you.
for my podcast listeners, Dennis, what is the website where they can find you and your work?
It's at DennisWCarroll.com. I have to put the W in there because there's another Dennis Carroll, and he's a football player, and that's not me, okay?
That's not you.
I don't play football. But anyway, it's DennisWCarroll.com, or you can get in touch with me at DennisWCarroll@gmail.com. And
Okay.
also, I have three podcasts that I do.
Mm-hmm.
On Monday nights at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I do The Road Less Traveled with
Okay.
my friend Gerald Fountain. And then Wednesday nights, I do Hunting the Shadows at 9 o'clock
Okay.
p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Friday nights, I do Paranormal Point of View at 9
Okay.
o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I do all those are 9 o'clock p.m. And
Okay.
on Paranormal Point of View, we do reviews, movies, and stuff that have something to do with the paranormal.
Okay.
And this Wednesday, tonight, actually, when I close this podcast out, I'll be doing
Mm-hmm.
Hunting the Shadows. We're going to talk about the witch, the one witch that all the other witches are afraid of, the Raven Mocker. So
Ooh.
that's going to be on Hunting the Shadows tonight.
Okay. Oh my God. Well, I'm going to put a link in the credits of the show anyway. Now, this book that you were talking about, is it been released or will you be releasing it soon?
Yeah, I have several books available on Barnes and Noble and Amazon. Just look up
Okay.
the author as Dennis W. Carroll. And
Okay.
one book is called Beyond the Shadows, a field guide to the paranormal. And the other
Okay.
book is called The Road Unseen, a paranormal journey into high strangeness.
I love it. I love it. High strangeness. Yep. Again, thank you so much, Dennis. It has been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. And I'm going to check up those podcasts because you're right. Yeah. I get it. I get it. Everything you're talking about is like, I get it. So thank you so much. And I'll be following up with you.
Was
And so
my
you can come
pleasure.
back and tell us more stories. Okay.
All right, definitely.
Take care.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye. Wow. He's one of my kind. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. You know what? I I just, I was a little bit scattered with asking him the questions about certain stories, but it's like, no, I want to ask him about the werewolf. No, but I want to ask him about the vampire. No, but I want to ask him about the ghost. Next time, because he's coming back. If I can help it, he's coming back. I'm gonna see if I can just like tailor it more so I can, but I bet he's got some great stories. Firsthand stories that he's heard about and firsthand experience. Both. You know, as far as because that was funny. He realizes that first expedition out there with a werewolf is like, yeah, that guy found it with a bottle. That was like, all right, that bear that was going through your trash can, that wasn't a werewolf. And and it's the truth. That's a lot of these sightings. How's this? It's not that people. Okay, wait. Sometimes people are lying. They're out and out lying. And then there's people that they don't mean to lie in it either because either I don't know they're drunk or whatever. That what they think they see is what they think they see. Maybe it was a bear, but to this guy and his data was like that's a werewolf. Maybe it was. In other words, they don't. They're not. And then there's the legit, encounters of seeing things, hearing things, whatever that they, that there's no way around it. And again, this is the thing, what people don't realize is that, yeah, nowadays everybody carries around a phone, which is like a camera. And even then, stuff happens, especially when you're not looking for it. Some people are really good that they turn it on and they're filming, but there's a lot of people that all you do is like, huh? But for the majority of time, when there was some type of technology, people were not walking around with cameras or video recorders or anything. So they would have these experiences, whether they were out in the woods or in the house or whatever. And all they had was, I saw this, and they were alone. Maybe, well, they were lucky they had somebody else with them, or maybe a couple of people where they had witnesses. And even then, sometimes people would say, well, you're all crazy. And it's like, and a lot of times you were by yourself, and it was like, all right, you know, even if your reputation was as a credible person, sometimes people would look at you like, and things like that happen randomly. I don't know whether you want to call it a rip, maybe in time. There's people that have experienced or seen things that they never see again. Some people think that's a rip in time. That sometimes they even see, like, let's say, reenactments of battles. Like all of a sudden, they're like there. It's not that like the phantoms are here. They're there in that time period, and they see things, and then it's gone. Who knows? It's so weird out there. I love it. But yeah, go. Like I said, I will have a link to his website on the credits of the show. Go check it out. He's got the books. God knows he's got the experience. Check out his podcasts because, but believe me, it sounds like he's got plenty to talk about, and he's got the experience. This is what I like. This is not somebody that just read it out of a book or saw some paranormal reality shows and, hey, I know now all about the paranormal because I don't care. I don't care what anybody says. Unless you're out in the field doing something with this, including the boring stuff where nothing happens, or you give up a weekend or a Saturday night, then that's not real paranormal research. It's not. I know people say, that's not true. It's like, I don't care what they tell you. Unless you're on a team or with one other person, if you want to put a team together, and even then, I'd say be careful. And you actually do the legwork. And by the way, I'm going to say this. A lot of people sometimes say, well, I'm going to get this equipment. And I was like, stop it. You don't need that much equipment. You could have a digital recorder and this to do an investigation. And because everybody's trying to imitate all these shows where they've got all these cameras and the FLIR and the this and the EMF. Well, the EMF is pretty basic, but these multiple cameras and you know what? Sometimes you don't, well, oh, what am I saying? You don't need that stuff. You don't need that if you're a legit, serious investigator, right? If you're a legit, serious investigator, you don't have to spend a bunch of money on equipment. It's like I said, things happen. So in other words, how's this? That, yeah, you might be able to capture some evidence with what you got, a camera or a digital recorder or something, but I'll tell you what, there's nothing like your own personal experience that you didn't capture anything like that, or that you could say, wow, this is hardcore proof. But there's something that when you have that experience, you go, this is real. This paranormal, whether you want to call it the afterlife or the supernatural or the paranormal. And of course, this bleeds into ufology and all that other stuff. That doesn't matter whether you captured proof or not. Unless you're delusional or you want to like kid yourself and you know that you realize this is real. I might not be able to prove it to anybody, but I know that what I saw, what I heard, whatever the scenario that played out was, this is legit. And that's all you need to go forward with it. And believe it or not, that's what a lot of people are looking for. And for some people, like I said, they have that legit moment, the real, and then they wig out. Because for them, it was all playtime. It's like, oh, it's going to be playing and I'm never going to have that. And then they have a one moment, this one experience that is unquestionably what they supposedly were looking for. And then they're like, holy crap. And they do like this about face. And it's like, get me out of Dodge. I don't want to have anything to do with this because I never thought it was real. I never thought a ghost was real. I just thought that, or something darker in some cases. I just thought it was like, it was play acting. It was just hanging out with people and having a good time, pretending, LARPing. And you find out you're not LARPing. It's real. And then there's other people that inspires them to go forward. It's like, man, this is real, and I'm going to stay in this field. This is really interesting. And then you do investigations. A lot of them go nowhere. As a matter of fact, a lot of them go nowhere because, like I said, either it's nothing's there, the family opts to their own solution, which is I'm gonna move out. I'm talking about this is a family house, or you can't get access to the location again, or people just shut you down, or it just it just goes away. I would say a good portion of the time, it's either there's nothing there or it's very residual. There's nothing intelligent. There's nothing, and then some people, like I said, especially after the advent of these paranormal shows, they kind of like get upset when you don't tell them, hey, you have a full-blown haunting of maybe one or two, and they're like, but are you sure? And it's like, yeah, like be glad. Be glad that this might be just residual, all right? Or maybe nothing at all. Maybe you've got bad plumbing or something else. I mean, there's a lot of things sometimes that imitate what people, especially if you're primed to believe it's supernatural, like, oh, that noise, that scratching is like, no, it's nothing. It's like you might have an animal just nesting in the whatever of your, it can be a million things. And but it's very interesting. I got to talk to Dennis again. So guys, again, please look me up at miamighostchronicles.com, mpelliser.com. Like I said, I have links to everything there. Sign up for my newsletter on Substack. That's a good way to stay in touch. And like I said, I'm on all the podcast platforms. I'm on all the major video platforms. But if anything, always you can go down to my website and you're going to find links to everything there. MP3 files, video files, or direct links to the video platforms or the whatever the some people have certain favorite podcast platforms that I'm on iHeartRadio, I'm on Spotify, I'm on Apple. Wherever you go looking, you will find me there. So please come back. I have a lot of interesting guests just like him. And thanks again for coming back every week and spending this time with me. Take care.